I haven't ever told anybody about this, not my friends, not even my partner, not my doctor, but here's what's going on for me.
You're listening to In Your Pants with Dr. Susie G, the physiotherapist for your private, helping you get in the know, down the low.
Hey friends, it's Dr. Susie G here, and welcome to another In Your Pants podcast. Thank you so much for being here. All right, on today's show, we are talking about senior sex and sex after grief. And we unpack some of the common socially held beliefs and stereotypes around sex and aging. In what ways does our sexuality change psychologically, biologically, and relationally, and how we can stay connected to our sexuality while grieving the death of a partner or a loved one. And then how do you know when it's time to engage in a new sexual relationship, whether it's a friend with benefits or a new love connection? To help me unpack these questions, I have a very special guest today. Her name is Joan Price. And Joan Price calls herself an advocate for ageless sexuality. She's known by the media as the voice of senior sex. She's the author of 4 books about sex and aging, including the award-winning Naked at Our Age, Talking Out Loud About Senior Sex, and Sex After Grief, Navigating Your Sexuality After Losing Your Beloved. At age 77, Joan continues to talk out loud about senior sex, partnered or solo. You can learn more about Joan and find her books, webinars, and blog at her website at joanprice.com. I hope you enjoy the show. Joan, welcome to the In Your Pants podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Susie, there's no place I'd rather be right now.
Thanks so much. Well, let's dive right into it, Joan.
Let's do it.
What are some of the common socially held beliefs and stereotypes around sex and aging?
Oh, I want to believe this is changing, but I don't know for sure it is. What I'm fighting all the time is what I call the ick factor, which is the belief that sexually active, sexually desirous, sexually vibrant seniors are for some reason icky and pathetic and ludicrous. This is something that I've been battling for the 16 and a half years I've been doing this work. It's getting a little better now, but I do find that it still exists in our society. And even more important, it exists within ourselves. That I find so often that seniors who have questions for me or concerns with me have internalized some of these, some of the ick factor, and we have to get rid of that first before we can solve the rest of the problems.
Absolutely. And why do you think that is, Joan? Why do you think there's this ick factor that we hold on to such stereotypes and beliefs throughout our years and in our culture? Why do you think that is?
It's this would take an hour just to even answer that one
Get it?
lightly, because it's a matter of what our society says. It's a matter of our culture. It's our media. When's the last time you saw, or how many, count on more than the fingers of one hand, if you can recall any other public figures, celebrities of any sort who are portrayed as sexy and they are over, let's say 50, that's easy, over 60, over 70, over 80. How many can you count? I can count about 3.
Yeah. It's definitely not something that is portrayed out in a culture, for sure. We're not
But we
talking
can
about it.
change that, Susie. We
Yep.
can educate ourselves about what happens through sex and aging. We can practice those things that will help us stay sexy and zesty lifelong, and we can talk out loud about it. We can say to people, that
That's
joke
right.
isn't funny.
That's right. That's right. So, in what ways does sex change as we age, Joan? Both, psychologically, biologically, and also relational.
That's another hour conversation. However, I'll try to do a brief overview. Um, Physically, there are many changes with aging that affect our sexual function and affect our sexual drive, our sex drive. But beyond that, besides these normal signs of aging that will
Mhm.
slow down arousal, for example, or make erections less hard or less frequent, um, there are also things that we have to do because of other things happening in our bodies. We're on medications that may affect our sexual function or
Mhm.
our sex drive. We have have medical conditions that affect, for example, whether our joints will let us get into the positions we want to get into pain free,
Mhm.
or what do we do now? We can't do that. There is so much going on that affects our sexuality because if you think of it, it isn't just our genitals involved in sex, it's our whole
Mhm.
bodies, it's our brains, it's our comfort level, it's our emotions, it's our
Mhm.
relationships. All of these change as we age, all of these affect sex.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as far as staying connected with our sexuality, especially after, perhaps we may be grieving of the death of our partner or even ourselves as we're coping with, as you mentioned, sometimes we can face a chronic illness or changes in our body or that of our partner. Um, how can we stay connected with our sexuality during those moments in our life?
Well, there are two different things you're talking about. Grief is a whole separate issue, and I've written a book about that, sex
Hmm.
after grief, navigating our sexuality after losing our beloved. Really super important. Besides grief, which really is its own topic that I hope we'll get into,
Hmm.
how we stay in touch in general with our sexuality as we age, we need to make it a priority. We need to educate ourselves. We need to learn what is normal aging and what is not, what is a medical condition that needs some attention, because sometimes what's affecting our sexuality is something that we don't even know is going on in our body. And so we need to heed the signs. But we also need to make it a priority to work on our conversational skills, work on how we communicate with a partner, how we say to a partner, I know that's what I liked in the past, but right now that isn't working so well for me. Could we try this instead?
Hmm.
And to even know what the try this is, to work on yourself through solo sex, through self pleasuring, to figure out what it is that does work for you now. Or
Hmm.
you could say, I know we've always seen sex as meaning this, for example, meaning intercourse, but that's not so comfortable for me anymore. That's not um, so easy for you anymore. Can we just explore all the other ways that we can enjoy ourselves and pleasure each other sexually that don't have to put us in the position of getting stressed? Is this going to work this time?
Right, which definitely takes you away from that experience of
Mm.
eroticism and pleasure and connection in that moment.
Well, absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we're so worried, we have so much anxiety about this. Is my penis going to work enough for what I'm trying to do today?
Right.
Um, will he find me desirable? Will I be able to reach an orgasm? Will I be able to get on my knees
Yeah.
to do what I want to do on my knees? Will my wrist arthritis affect what I want to do with my hand? Will penetration work? What will we
Mhm.
do besides penetration? What would we, how can I ask for what I really want? Can we incorporate the sex toy that always does it for me into
Yeah.
our lovemaking together?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such an important conversation that, as a health professional and pelvic health physical therapist, it's not common for any health professional to ask about these questions like, is sex comfortable for you? Are there any concerns around your sexuality that you want to address? Because we don't know what someone might be experiencing, and it might be very simple as getting some sex furniture, or like you said, a sex
Yeah,
toy, or adding in some other modification or adaptation or aid, but in order to help maintain that connection with sexuality and pleasure and comfort. And there's nothing wrong with that, of kind of exploring a new framework around that, you know?
exactly. And you mentioned the questions you ask. I sometimes have the pleasure of giving talks to medical professionals, and I always encourage them to ask open ended questions
Hmm.
rather than, do you have any questions about sex or do you have any concerns about sex? To ask something like, how has sex changed for you recently? What can come out of that that wouldn't
100%.
come out with a yes or no question
Right. Or a checkbox on a patient
or a
intake form.
checkbox? Exactly.
Hmm. That's a beautiful question. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, feel free to use it. I would love to see it used as much as possible. How has
Absolutely.
sex changed for you? And I hope people who are are listening or viewing this are going to say, how would I answer that?
Yep.
And then, but to our audience, don't wait for your medical professional to ask that. Say that.
Hmm.
Say to your medical professional, listen, my sexuality is important to me. And here are some things that have changed for me, that are bothering me, that are of concern with for me, that are interfering with my pleasure.
Mm.
Let's find out what's going on. Because so often, and I know you must battle this with your profession, so often medical professionals who understandably have not had much training in sexuality
Hmm.
and maybe none in older age sexuality
Hmm.
will think that if they just throw a pill at the problem or some lubricant at the problem,
Right.
that's all they have to do, when actually they need to find out what's causing the problem.
Right.
Why is there pain? Why is there erectile difficulty?
Hmm. Hmm. Yep. Yep. Definitely not compartmentalizing it to just a body part, but it's the
Mhm.
person inhabiting those parts and their experiences that are of great importance. And to have conversation and permission to say, yes, let's talk about sex.
To normalize it.
Yes.
This is a normal part of life. Of course, it's
Yes.
important to you.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it does take courage, honestly, and bravery to lean into those spaces. A lot of the folks that I work with, sometimes it might just be the first time that they feel comfortable to divulge such
Yeah,
intimate details of themselves and vulnerable parts of themselves because no one else bothered to ask.
right. And that happens with me too, Susie,
Mm-hmm.
where I haven't ever told anybody about this, not my friends, not even my partner, not my doctor, but here's what's going on for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm honored that that happens in my presence, but on the other hand, I'm appalled that
Mm-hmm.
there's so little opportunity for it to happen in the rest of my clients' lives.
Yeah. And so that's why we're having this conversation together,
That's why
Joan,
we're
to
talking about it out
empower
loud.
others to feel confident and
Hmm.
safe to talk about their sexual health, their sexuality, for sure. Um, I wanted to segue back to the grief question with you, Joan. Can you talk to us a little bit about the grieving process when we grieve the death of a loved one or our partner, um, and how we can navigate that and still stay connected to our sexuality during that time?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that, because this was a really important and very personal, intensely personal book that I wrote. Um, Sex After Grief, I wrote because w- those of us who have been through the grief of losing our beloved and trying to maintain or regain or recapture our sexuality, or not even knowing what that's going to look like anymore, we need to be supported in that journey, and we need to learn that we can do it our way. Everybody grieves differently.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, we don't get through grief. We don't get done with grief. We don't complete grief. We don't get over grief, but we get through it. It's like a cycle. where it gets a little better and then it gets dark again and it gets a little better and it gets dark again. And it's like a spiral. But each time it gets a little better, it gets a little better than the last time it got a little better. And each time we sink back down, it gets a little bit easier than the last time we sank back down. So over time, and I know it's a cliche, it gets better over time, but it seriously does. During that time, though, your response to your own sexuality is going to vary as widely as anything varies from one human being to another. You may feel ready to get sexual. You may feel the, in fact, the not only the urge, but feel compelled to get sexual quickly because you need the release, or you need the contact from another person, or
Mhm.
you need to get out of your grief for a while, just even to have some relief from it for a while, and then you'll deal later with what it brings you. But just from for some moments, or you may feel yourself numbed for weeks, months, years.
Mhm.
You may feel, I don't know if I will ever want another person to touch me, but I sure feel horny. What can I do about it now? There can be all sorts of reactions, and I've just named a couple, few
Yeah.
of them. There are as many as there are human beings. So what we need to do is look at what we need, what we personally need, what we want to bring into our lives now, and to realize it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be, well, either I'll stay here alone watching television and eating ice cream, or I will have full on sex with a stranger. There's so much other than the two extremes that you can do. Can you bring in having sex with yourself, having sex with your favorite vibrator, or buying a new one,
Mhm.
celebrating your own body's capacity for sexuality? Do you want sex with another person to look like it did with your beloved, or to be something totally different?
Mhm.
For example, maybe you were in a long term monogamous um, marriage for, say, 50 years, as some of the people I talk to have been. And then suddenly you're alone. Your sex drive is starting to put out little, hello, I'm still here. Pay attention to me. And you're going, yeah, but what do I want to do about that? What do I want to do about that? I don't want another long term commitment. It's too soon. I'm still in love with my dead spouse.
Mhm.
However, my body yearns for touching.
Mm.
My genitals yearn for release. My brain wants to feel pleasure again. So, what can you do? And in the book, I offer a lot of different examples. In my grief journey, I did a lot of different things. And so I share what I did. And even when they were missteps, because sometimes they were, I would try something, oh, that was a mistake. But it wasn't really a mistake. It was not right for me at the time, but it wasn't really a mistake because everything I did or tried to do or thought about doing brought me a step closer to what it would really work for me.
Mm.
I needed to do sort of a process of elimination in order not to stay numb, in order not to be confined by my grief to where I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't share with anyone. And I don't just talk about my own experiences. I have excerpts from grief counselors and educators,
Mhm.
therapists, and I have a number of different grievers who sent in their stories.
Mm.
So all through the book, it's peppered with the experiences of people who explored sex after grief in a way that was very unlike me, that worked for them or that didn't work for them, that made them happy, that made them sad, that made them laugh later.
What a wonderful support and resource again for folks to just not feel like they're alone, because that could be a very
Yeah.
isolating siloed space, and your book certainly offers the opportunity to reframe and rethink about their sexuality, and perhaps just reconnect with that sexuality again, in different ways, especially navigating such a difficult time. And that's such a wonderful thing to have so many different experiences and flavors of others,
Mhm.
people, ways of navigating through that process. So thank you so much, Joan, for sharing that.
Well, thank you for being
Amazing.
so supportive of that. I planned it as a self-help book. It's
Hmm.
really, how do you figure out what you want? Here are some things to learn. Now, what do you want? How are you going to put this into action? At
Right.
the end of every chapter, there are activities, there are questions and activities for creating your own action plan, so that by the end of the book, you get, okay, I know what I want to do now. I know
Yeah.
what I want to try.
We're definitely in the podcast show notes, folks. You're gonna have access to all of Joan's resources and connecting with Joan and her books. So can't wait to share those with you. So thank you so much, Joan. I have one more question for you, if I can ask.
Of course.
How does someone know when it's time to engage in a new sexual relationship, whether it's with a friend with benefits or a new love connection? How does somebody know?
Well, you may not know. It's possible that you will be sure. It's more likely that you won't be sure.
Hmm.
So, my suggestion for that, in order to have the best outcome, is to think about taking sex in stages. Where, for example, you might say, I am really attracted to you. I'm enjoying the kissing we're doing. Let's say you've gotten to that stage. I would love to take it a little farther, but this is new to me, being with someone new. I don't know how far I want to go. I know I don't want to do XYZ. That's off the table.
Mhm.
I think I would like to explore AB. Could we agree that we'll just do that much right now, and or next time, or whatever it is you want to say, and then talk about how that was. And you can also say, it's nothing wrong with saying, um, I think I'm ready, but I'm warning you, I might start to cry. And if I do, here's what I want.
Mm.
Maybe you'll want to say, I want you to stop and hold me, or I want you to check in with me, or um, let's just go back to having a conversation, or let's, whatever it is, you get to set what that looks like.
Mhm.
You're not at the mercy of anything other than what you really want it to look like, and you have to learn to communicate that. It's not fair to a potential partner, or to a current partner, or to anyone, to just leave this to chance, to say, well, I'll try it, and I'll just white knuckle through it if it doesn't go well. No,
Mm.
no, no. If this is not a person you can have a conversation with
Right.
about where you are in your grief process, and what you want sexually, what you want, it touch wise or emotionally, if you can't talk about that, then it's not time for you to bring in another partner.
Mm.
It's not fair to yourself or to that person. Would you agree? I mean, you're a professional
I
too.
agree. I'm hearing communicate, communicate, communicate. Like, how
Yeah.
can how can someone scratch your itch if you don't know yourself where it is, how to navigate, how to explain what your needs and desires are, and having this direct, assertive
Yeah.
communication, and respectfully, sharing that and sharing that space, which I totally get is it can be an uncomfortable space. It's a scary space, but very freeing, right, Joan? Like once you kind of
Oh, it
allow
is
yourself.
totally liberating.
Hmm.
Once you get through the, I don't know if I can do this part,
Hmm.
and you just practice it. And in fact, maybe the first person that you practice this with is not even someone you're going to have sex with, but someone who understands you well. And you just want to say, can I practice the kind of conversation I want to have with someone? Can you just not listen and not judge me, but give me feedback?
Great strategy. Really, role playing. It's a great
Hmm.
strategy. Yeah. Do you do that often with your clients, Joan?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
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 It definitely helps, having
Mhm.
that, breaking the ice and having a script and having someone kind of give feedback like you're saying. That's great.
Yeah.
That's a
And
wonderful
realize
strategy.
when I say clients, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a
Mm.
medical professional, but I'm a senior sex educator, been in this field for 16 and a half years. So I do have consultations with people who want to,
Yeah.
who've either read my books or watched my webinars and have specific personal questions they want to ask me confidentially. And then I set up consultations by phone or by Zoom, and we work through their issues, and very often it just takes one meeting or a couple of meetings
Mhm.
before they feel okay, I feel empowered and I have the skills now to do what I want to do.
Absolutely. What a great support. And Joan, speaking of, if our
Yes,
listeners want to connect with you, how can they find you, follow you, connect with you?
everything is at joanprice.com, my website. There are links to my social media, there are links for getting in touch with me. You'll read about my books, the film I made, it's behind me, and how did all of that, the webinars, www.joanprice.com, and just explore around there. A lot of free information there too.
Yes. Great information. I had a chance to really peruse and I loved it. I mean, the videos, and you have some exercise classes as well.
Yes, one of the other things I do in my life, because we are multifaceted people,
That's right.
is I teach contemporary line dancing.
Love it. That's great. Great. And dancing is such a sensual way. I mean, I love dancing. I guess I'm speaking for myself. For me, I love it. Very sensual. Well, Joan, thank you so much for being on the show today and for sharing all of that beautiful wisdom and empowering um, uh, messages for us to embrace our sexuality throughout our lifetime. So thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Joan.
And thank you for the work you do, Susie. It's because of you that we're able to make this world a better place.
Likewise, Joan. Thank you. And to all of our listeners and viewers out there, thank you so much for being here with us today. As always, in loving wellness for your pelvis, this is Dr. Susie G. Until next time, bye bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to head on over to drsuzieg.com where you can get more information, show notes, and related articles on today's topic. Also, if you like what you're hearing, head on over to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, and leave us a rating and review. We'd love to hear feedback. Thanks again.